3, 2, 1. Hey guys, welcome back for the RazCast. We have tons of people here, so welcome in. It's a very, very long-awaited episode of the RazCast featured with my buddy TheFreshBakedGoods. We have tons of people here, tons of info, and we have sourced so many questions. This is the official RazCast DevCast. So welcome. Round of applause for everyone here. Thank you for your time. We're so excited. So let's go around the horn and start knocking out who is everyone. So right above me, I have Adam. Adam, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Adam. I'm the senior brand lead on Hell Let Loose. I've been at Team 17 and with Hell Let Loose since I joined, so 3 years ago. And yeah, I've been off project for the past, since Falling Dark update, and then recently rejoined. And yeah, leading it forward from my sort of side, making sure we have a bit more consistency going forward on that front.
Nice. That's good to hear. Next over, we have Kieran.
Hey, how's it going? Yes, I'm Kieran. I'm the technical director at Expression Games. I have about 19 years in the games industry. I've worked for both Sony and Microsoft first party, along with lots of other places. And I'm looking forward to the challenge of bringing some of that knowledge from AAA, particularly console development, first-party developments to Hell Let Loose to make it everything that it can be.
I'm sure we'll have some really good questions for you, especially the console folks. Next here, we have Matt.
Hey everyone, yeah, I'm Matt. I'm the creative director at Expression Games, working on Hell Let Loose. I've been in video games about 30 years. I've worked with Kieran before on numerous projects, so we go back. I also, as well as looking after sort of all the game design elements and creative elements of Hell Let Loose, I am the sort of historian on the game. So I've got a lot of background in history, World War II in particular. So anything relating to the history of the subject matter or the game mechanics or gameplay, anything like that, I'll be able to answer your questions about all that kind of good stuff.
Nice. Super, super excited. And last, but certainly not least, we have the one and only Wombat. Wombat, want to give your background?
Thank you. Yes. AKA Human Meat Shield. No. No, yeah, I mean, I've been here now for, I think it's coming up to 10 months. So, yeah, community manager. I'm down on the ground with everybody. So, any questions regarding community, I'll try and answer them.
Nice.
I mean,
Thank
really,
you.
Wombat's the most famous person here.
Yeah.
All of us, which is hilarious.
I wouldn't say famous, but okay.
Infamous.
Oh.
Oh man. But yeah, we're super excited again. Thank you for carving out time for us today. And if you guys watching right now, I just want to go ahead and preface, we have sourced so many questions from TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Reddit, where else?
Different Discord communities.
Discords, just so much. We also had a few representatives from the First Clan in the console space that really had some good questions. We want to make sure that just as we represent the PC community, we're also speaking for the console community as well, as you guys are just important. So let's start off fresh. Let's go ahead and start off the first question.
So, I mean, just to really, because I mean, you guys introduced yourself from like Expression Games and stuff. Expression Games is probably like really new to a lot of Hell Let Loose players. They might not actually have heard of you guys yet. So, can you kind of explain what Expression Games is and what you guys, really do for Hell Let Loose?
Yeah, sure. So Expression is a new game developer. Most of us have worked together at previous studios. We came together really with the main goal of working on Hell Let Loose. We are a fully fledged development studio. We have all the game disciplines covered, so everything from audio through to animation, through to gameplay programming, network programming, etc. Game design, level design, character art, so all the new uniforms that we're going to be doing, hard surface art, so weapons and armor and bits and pieces like that, plus all the world environment, so the actual levels that you'll be playing in. So yes, a completely fully formed studio. We have, like I said, we're fairly new. but we formed together with Hell Let Loose, very much center and focus in mind. We are extremely passionate about the game. A lot of us play the game in our own time, have been doing for a long time. My favorite role is officer, for example. I've got quite a few people on the team that like to play anti-tank. Quite handy with bazookas. Yeah, and which is great. So yeah, we care deeply about the game. We love the subject matter. A lot of us are really interested in World War II history, and love what the Black Matter made with this game. So being able to continue it from the wonderful start they made.
Nice.
Awesome.
And then I guess, obviously Team 17 is now developing the game. You guys went from publishers to developers and whatnot. Can you go into detail about that and kind of the relationship of Team 17 with Hell Let Loose over the years?
Yeah. So obviously, Black Matter kickstarted the game, but as soon as it went into early access, it was in partnership with Team 17. So from the very beginning, we've been providing, as a publisher, it's a lot different roles, especially for how we work. Is we'll have QA sitting in, for example, with Hell Let Loose, QA was sat on our side, QAing the levels and everything like that, all throughout early access. That goes for game design, was also in-house reviewing things, milestones coming in from Black Matter and everything like that. So up until Black Matter's departure, Team 17 were there doing all of this sort of support roles, and also doing a bit of, maybe should we look at doing this theatre of war? Should we look at doing this map next as well? And really working in partnership with Black Matter, which is why it's always interesting to see some comments where it's like, you had no idea what you were doing on the game, and it's like, what sort of publisher do you think we are? We just sat there like, no, just you guys do whatever you want. We've got no touch of points of this. So yeah, Team 17 was there. When we obviously acquired the IP, that's due to us really wanting and believing How Let Loose can continue to live on going forward. I mean, if you're a small studio and you've been working on a game for 6 and a bit years, like Max individually planting trees on Hurtgen Forest, because this was before you could just place trees. They invest themselves so much into that. So you're going to have some form of not burnout, but fatigue when you're working on a project like that. And so when we look at the title and the brand that is Hell Let Loose now, we really want to support it and take it like further in terms of how do we support the community we currently have, but then build on that going out. So like with Matt and his team, when they're looking at each year of the war, which was on the original like roadmap for this year, such a great idea. And why has nobody done this? Well, how do we go about implementing that in a way that's aligned to the core values of Hell Let Loose and keep it true to the core gameplay, and then just build on that and serve this amazing community that we have already got? So yeah, that's why with the sort of acquisition, such a horrible corporate term, but acquisition of the IP is to allow us to support it and grow it further while remaining remaining to the core sort of part of the game there, rather than us trying to look. And this is why partnering with people like the guys at Expression are so important. Like, you need to have these partners that get it, understand the game, and also know where they want to go with it as well. Because we're not going to try and derail and make it Call of Duty or Battlefield or any other insert big popular shooter here. It's how do we take Hell Let Loose and just give people more Hell Let Loose?
I like it.
Yeah, that's a good one, because I mean that's what the community is definitely worried of, and making sure we have that clear, defined path of Hell Loose and core Hell Loose, I think, is so important.
It is so important for any community when you've got a game that you love and it's carved its own niche as well. And yes, you've got a niche, but you don't want to remain tiny, or niche for our American viewers. But it's when you have that, it's how do we not only just stay in our lane, but we know people are going to be really enjoy this, which is why I've been looking at the new user onboarding and stuff like that. But staying so close to what makes Hell Let Loose great and not straying away. We don't want it to be Titanfall, wall running and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I know. Sorry to break everybody's. It's where Matt goes. Technically, the Germans were inventing some wall running capabilities in 1946.
Yeah, right.
I'm not entirely sure that there's any documented proof that troops were able to wall run like they did in Titanfall. I could do some research to find out, but I don't believe there is anything that I've come across so far.
You could probably find it on the internet nowadays.
There you go.
It's fine.
I guarantee you this
AI
is gonna
it.
get taken out of context
Yeah.
already.
Yeah,
We're like 3 minutes in, and like someone's already gonna clip that and be like, "Oh, wall run's coming to hell loose."
Pink gunskins.
Yeah,
No,
right.
exactly.
Anime skins coming soon.
Perfect.
Yeah, right.
Perfect.
Confirmed.
Perfect.
Confirmed. Well, that's the exclusive of this.
Oh my god.
Cool.
German
no, thank you for
movement.
painting that picture for us. I know it's a lot of people don't know what happens behind the scenes, so it's good to hear these things and know what you guys do and everything. But with all that, I mean, let's jump into like the actual questions from the community. And like Raz said, these are not even our questions; these are questions we got from everybody else. And I'm gonna go ahead and apologize. We got hundreds of them. If we don't get to yours or anything, we couldn't. It is what it
Literally
is.
hundreds. So
Couldn't do it. But Raz, if you want to kick us off with the first question, go for it, man.
yeah, so by far, this was the most requested for us to discuss and go into detail with. Obviously, with the roadmap being pushed back and a reallocation of focus and resources to fixes, optimization, what's the current plan in regards to focusing on optimization, focusing on bug fixes, and how are we targeting that?
Who wants
Okay,
to take
so-
that one?
Should I go first? Okay.
Yeah, crack on.
So, first of all, I think it's worthwhile talking about what you started off saying now, which is the change of plan. We definitely have realized that our focus needs to change. We particularly, particularly from Expression's point of view, coming onto project, we were keen to, bring as much new content as possible to the players in Hell Let Loose, and we were pushing forwards as fast as we could do with that, without necessarily taking into account the legacy issues that are in the game, things that players absolutely want to get fixed. And it was a really, I think, good wake-up call for us to realise that what we were pushing forwards to do, which we thought, coming onto the project was the right thing to do, to bring more content, to the players, wasn't actually the right thing to focus on right now. We do have a fairly sizable bug database that we've inherited coming onto the project. We are very much aware of a lot of the issues that players have, and thank you to all the players that submit bug reports. That really helps. It's a big game. It's hard to test all of it. There are certainly issues that don't easily happen in our test environments. Until we get thousands of players playing the game, we don't see them, which makes it tricky. Bringing back PTEs obviously is huge for both the community, but mainly for us, because we do struggle to reproduce certain issues that require a lot of players. We have that environment now where we can get the players to help us verify bug fixes, but also to help us, reproduce those issues. The things that we struggle to do in the development environment, so we can understand why they happen and then how to fix them. So, one bug fix, which is coming out very soon in update 14.2, is the grenade bug is finally fixed. Insert huge applause here.
Huge.
Yeah, right.
Huge.
Everyone's losing their minds right now.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Someone said they do a conga line if we actually fixed it. So
Yeah,
I'm fully
I-
expecting
we will
a
video
conga
proof
line.
Need pictures.
That is huge.
we need the evidence of conga line being done for us to take that as payment for fixing the
Yeah.
bug.
Otherwise, you're just gonna put it back in the game. It's only fair.
Yeah, I know.
I will revert it to back in its original form where you drop the grenade at your feet rather than
Oh,
it vanishing,
The best.
because that was the fun one back in the day
Oh,
where
man.
it just didn't go back into your pocket, just dropped at your feet and have at it.
Jeez. But that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah. The really interesting thing when it came to the grenade bug was we were able to ultimately fix it because of something that we messed up. So one thing that you'll be aware of is update 14.1 wasn't without its issues. One of the main issues we had was a matter of minutes after we pushed 14.1 live, we realized everything wasn't quite right. There was issues with the PC servers, and it was a result of our testing practices, which we've now changed to make sure this can't happen again. But the way that we were testing the PC server just did not show up this issue, which happened, which we saw for the first time when we pushed it live. And as a result of that issue, the workaround that we implemented pretty quickly, I think we managed to do it within the first hour, was we reverted to running a development server rather than our normal fully optimized server, which didn't have the particular issue that was happening that was stopping people being able to play. This did. So that was a positive that players could play. However, was the negative that there was performance degradation on the server side because it was a development server. So this was the result. This was the reason that there was more rubber banding, particularly on vehicles, for instance, during a period of time. I believe it was maybe a week and a half or so. So I'm going to get back to the grenade bug in a minute because this all does tie together. But before I touch on that, we made a number of realizations during that process of having to revert to a development server. And as we were investigating why our fully optimized server wasn't working, we made a realization that the PC servers, for some time, it was prior to us being on project, it's unclear to us exactly how long this has been, maybe it was forever, had never been running in a multi-threaded scenario. Unreal Engine itself on the server was being forced to run single-threaded, which maybe I'm getting a bit too technical for people right now, but those that understand, game development, in particular Unreal Engine, it's designed to be a multi-threaded engine. It's supposed to take advantage of the CPU you have and take advantage of all the cores. And it was being told not to, which wasn't great. So with the help of a few community server owners, we began testing changing that so the server would run multi-threaded, and which also allowed us at the same time to start running the fully optimized version of the server. Straight away, we're getting feedback that rubber banding was way better, which was great. And a few days later, we managed to roll that out globally across all the PC servers. Interestingly, we found that there was still an issue with that, which was because the PC server had been running in a non-multi-threaded state for a long time. Like I say, we're not entirely clear how long that has been, a long time. We have since discovered that the Archon tools, which lots of the community server owners run a whole host of different Archon tools, whether they be their own ones, the open source Archon tool. There's I keep finding out every day that there's other tools that people have made. There's a lot that this community has done, which is great, but also quite hard for us to support. But what we discovered was that the server side for handling Archon connections wasn't thread safe. So while we'd now made the server much more optimal in using multi-threading, if you were making heavy use of Archon, it could cause issues and server instability and server crashes. We have a fix for that now, and that will be rolling out pretty soon, which is good.
Nice.
Getting back, however, to the grenade bug, the other really good thing which happened when we reverted back to using a development server was we got a lot more logging from servers, which we normally wouldn't have for performance reasons. Most logging is disabled on a fully optimized server. And thanks to a few community server owners that submitted some logs to us, when we were going through those, we managed to find a few really helpful bits of information, which ultimately led to identifying the grenade bug happening live on the community server, which verified our thoughts on what could be happening, and then it was actually pretty quick from that point that we were able to get a fix in, and we tested that in the PCE recently, and we in-house in the QA team have thrown literally thousands of grenades. Our internal QA's expression on the first day of us submitting the fix ended the day saying he'd counted over 900 himself, and across all the different QA teams, from ourselves, Team 17, external QA as well, and as well now players in the PTE, we're yet to have a single recurrence, so we're pretty confident this is fixed.
Good to hear.
Nice, that's huge.
But it is Hell Let Loose, so we're all fingers crossed.
Yeah, I know, right?
Because we really know it is can be a bit of a tricky mistress, the code base. So, but yeah, fingers crossed it's looking as confident as we can be.
If I may, just kind of a follow up to that. So, this is the PC side. How does that translate to the console side? Because console currently, I just played it the other day, right? Like, they are also struggling from that, server lagging and the grenade glitch. Like, how are we going forward, even though we have the PC parity, necessarily translating those fixes to console?
Yeah, so virtually everything is the same, with a massive asterisk next to it, and the same between console server and PC server. They're ultimately the same code that they both run. They run in very different environments, but the code that's built and run on them is essentially the same. So fixes we bring to one generally comes to the other as well. One of the challenges that we have for console players is that the physical servers that the game runs on run multiple actual instances of the Hell Let Loose game server. We recently made a change so that we're running less servers on a physical server now, which has made an improvement. It's not enough. I accept that. We have a lot of work to do, and we are working very hard on it. But it has really helped with. Previously, we were seeing the servers spending extended periods of time with the CPU as 100%, or technically, and this might not seem possible, but it is with the way that these servers run over 100%, which just meant they couldn't keep up. So you would see extended periods of things like rubber banding and things like that, because the server was just trying to catch up to what was happening. So since we've reduced the number of servers, that is better. Generally, we're seeing that the servers do hit 100% CPU, but it generally spikes and recovers pretty quickly. But it's an area we need to continue pushing into. The other side of consoles is typically consoles are less performant than your average PC, obviously depending on your PC. So we have been looking at that side as well. It's not just the server side where there's issues. So we have our pretty awesome technical art team, which has been going slowly. It's a long process, but going through all the levels and and optimizing, questioning whether we need hundreds of thousands of triangles making up a simple object in the game, and just doing that that pass of adding a bit of TLC, a bit of love, to make it run as as good as possible, and that's an ongoing process. We've been hitting the worst case offenders, as we are made aware by QA or the community, that there's particular issues on particular levels, but it's more helpful if it's a particular area of a level. Then we go in and we optimize around that. So as a message to the community, we do want to hear from you on these things. If there are particular areas in levels where it's particular issues, let us know. It's like the game's big, the levels are huge. It takes us time to visit all these things. So if you can help point us towards particular areas, then we can get there a lot quicker.
Nice.
I appreciate you touching on rubber banding earlier because that was the next question, and it sounds like you guys are, we're on a good track for that. But I do have a follow-up question. Stuttering's probably the other big issue that it comes up a bunch, and it's in the last AMA and everything. It sounded like you guys were starting to get to the bottom of that. Can you guys go into detail on what you're kind of doing to fix the stuttering problem in the game right now?
Yeah, sure. How technical do you want me to get in this?
As someone as dumb as me can understand it, please.
Okay. So, making games in large worlds is tough for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is that the way that computers represent numbers means that as numbers get bigger and bigger, your ability to represent that number starts to lose precision and break down. So in a large world, if you are getting, for instance, really far away from the origin, so let's call that 0, and I want to go, so many thousand units of distance in one direction, as numbers are getting bigger and bigger, certain calculations that you're doing in your program can start to lose precision and break down. This isn't made any better with Epic making a decision that in Unreal Engine, their units is centimeters. In a lot of other programs, they default to SI units, which would be meters. But with centimeters, you are getting to very big numbers pretty quickly. So quite quickly, as you're starting to move through a game world, certain calculations start to break down, and where you might expect to, say, get a number 1,000, you might get 999, for instance, if you do a calculation. And this can affect a whole load of things. Most notably, it could affect the position that you notice something in the game world. So as it animates or moves, you might just notice that it slightly, jerks around slightly rather than being smooth because that maths is breaking down. Interestingly, Epic does have a fix for this, but their fix is upgrade to Unreal Engine 5. Oof. Unreal Engine 5 has a feature where you can, say, use double precision maths through the entire engine, and then because the double precision basically means that you are able to represent numbers in a way which doesn't break down for a lot longer than normally. Unfortunately, upgrading to Unreal Engine 5, while it's not completely off the cards for Hell Let Loose, it would be a lot of work. There have been, and certainly coming on to project now, we're just scratching the surface of seeing the amount of engine level changes that have been made to support Hell Let Loose. It's significant. The process of upgrading an engine is a really tough process of understanding the changes being made to the engine and then potentially having to remake them. And that's made even more difficult that Unreal Engine 5 uses a completely different physics engine than Unreal Engine 4. And for Hell Let Loose, the physics engine itself was modified to support some of the things in the game. So, as we all know, there are sometimes a few interesting scenarios with physics in the game, particularly with vehicles. And the process of converting the game to use a different physics engine, and a physics engine which doesn't have all the custom changes that were made for Hell Let Loose, it's scary and almost certainly would result in changes of behavior and maybe not good changes. So it would be a big process. So for now, we can't talk about Unreal Engine 5. It could happen in the future, but it's a lot of work and it's a long way away. So that leaves us with Unreal Engine 4, and certainly for the time being. And we have that problem that I was talking about, as you get, further and further away from the origin in the game world, maths breaks down and things start to look not quite right. So the solution in Unreal Engine 4 is to use a thing called world origin rebasing, where you, at a certain point, decide, I'm getting a little bit too far away from the origin now, and things might be starting to get a little bit funky right now. So I'm going to effectively pick everything up and move it so the world origin is somewhere else, which means that where I am right now is not 10,000 units away from the origin. It's now just 10 units away, and everything is as we expect. And that works. And that has been in Hell Let Loose for a long, long time. And it has historically, I know this from looking at the code base, had issues and bugs, because I see comments about make sure we don't do rebasing when the vehicle's too close because it could freak out, for instance. So when we do a rebase, it's a very expensive process, because we take the Hell Let Loose game world. We have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of individual objects. So as I said, we're literally picking all those up and shifting them. It's a lot of work for the computer to do, and that's happening on your PC, not the server. So again, going back to, for instance, consoles, less powerful, typical from your PC. That process is tough and could quite easily lead to a frame rate stutter, as it does that process. Like I said, the Hell Let Loose for the longest time has always done this, but it used to do it much less frequently than it does right now. So the reason it does it more now is unfortunately because of the British weapons. So when we were coming to get the British weapons into game, one thing you'll notice, try this when you next boot the game up, British weapons, when you go to ADS, you'll notice that a lot of them will have parts of the weapon that are much closer to the camera than other weapons in the game. And getting back to this maths that can break down, you're much more likely to see the effects of that maths breaking down if something's really close to the camera. You might see stuff, as it's animating, the sway of the weapon. You might see it glitching a little bit rather than being smooth, for instance. So with the British weapons, with some of them, it was with the settings we had before for rebasing, you could get a certain distance away from the world origin and it would look pretty janky. So the solution we had, which fixes that jankiness, was to make it so we rebase when moving less distance away from the world origin. So we reduced it quite a bit, which fixed that visual issue, but made us rebase much more regularly as you move through the game world. And because it does it more regularly, you get the frame rate hiccup much more frequency as you move through the game world. Now, we are trying to figure out what our best way of fixing this is. Right now, we are testing a change where we have doubled the distance from what's currently live in the game of when it will rebase. So it will halve basically the frequency of seeing that frame rate hiccup happen. that's where we are today. It's something that we're going to continue, investigating. Like I say, it's a very tough thing to understand how to fully fix it. It's unfortunately a product of Unreal Engine 4 and large game worlds, interestingly as well, some of the other optimizations we've talked about will help with this. So as the tech art team are going through the levels that we have now, and they're doing optimizations, generally as part of that, they're reducing the object count in the worlds. They're combining things, they're making things more optimized, which means that when it does a rebase, there's less work to do. So the stutters when it does happen will be less. So there's a number of things we're doing which are going to improve it. But it's going to be, I think, relatively small improvements on each update as we continue to figure out ways that we can make it a little bit smoother.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah, I think people just appreciate the fact that you guys are, it's a lot of work, and I think I think everyone's appreciative of the fact that you guys are putting this much effort into solving it.
Yeah, I think this is like the main topic, for the rest of this year, is like that's what the focus is. So it's nice to go into depth of like addressing the issue, understanding the issue, and how we tackle it. Absolutely.
One of my programmers had a very interesting comments on this particular bug the other day, which honestly this isn't a serious comment, but it kind of solved the problem. So if there's a lot of games these days where, on current gen consoles, where you might get an option between frame rate and quality, how good it looks. We could, I don't think this is a good idea, we could give you a slider in the options where you basically choose how often you want it to rebase. You could choose for it never to, but you'd get to the edge of the map and things could start looking a little bit funky, but it would never, ever, ever stutter. It's like, we could do that. I don't think it's the thing that the players would want. So yeah, at the moment, we're trying to find that sweet spot of, reducing the amount of times we have to do this, while making sure that we don't have it looking janky when things run amazing.
It always gets that awful moment of, I worked on PUBG and you had that whole, just turn your graphics settings down to low and your game runs fine, but then also you can see people hiding in grass because you have such poor polygon, and you just have all the top competitive people, just their game looking awful because it gives them a competitive advantage. So
this
is
actually
always a tricky one.
A great transition to the next question. So I want to talk about LODs and map assets, becoming invisible and not rendering stuff. How do you guys go about tackling something like this? Because it seems like it's very specific to each map. I don't, to me, I don't know how stuff works in the back end. But people always complain about the melted buildings and the invisible walls on PHL and stuff like that.
And Stalingrad.
Yeah, Stalingrad. But how do you guys go about tackling something like this? Like, what's the solution?
The interesting thing is, and it comes a large amount down to the legacy of how long this game's been worked on, and the ideas of how to build levels has changed during that time. While Black Matter was working on it, so as you look at different levels, they utilize different methods for doing different things. So, and that's why some levels might have more LOD issues than others, is because they're physically built in different ways and use different ideas of how they're going to construct those worlds and how they're going to deal with LODs. LODs are critically important, particularly for console platforms. If we always rendered the game world at the resolution that you get when it's up close, the objects, the game would be running at 10 frames a second. It's well, actually on console hardware it wouldn't be running at all. You'd just be out of video and then it'd explode
on a fire.
Yeah, so there's something you have to do. And because of that, it's always a compromise. At a certain point, you have to choose that you're going to start rendering something in a different way, which is less expensive to the computer that's rendering it. Like I say, there's a few different methods that the game uses in different levels for how it goes about doing this. But in every case, regardless of which method is being used, it ultimately comes down to an artist going in and tuning, going like, okay, at this distance, it should change to this LOD, or it should start rendering this other representation of this part of the level instead. And then there's also, most of our levels use a thing called HLODs, which are a thing which Fortnite uses. You can go and Google that, and it's.
I don't
it's
know
a
if you
thing
could
which has been
say
posted.
hella loose in Fortnite in the same set.
Yeah,
You're gonna get
no.
canceled, dude.
Don't make me get taken out of context for this podcast.
Delete that.
Yeah, right.
All right. Sorry. Go ahead though.
So, but yeah, so HLODs are a really cool bit of technology which makes it really cheap to render something, and if it's far enough away, it can look pretty close to what it would look like, if you were rendering it normally. But the creation of HLODs is tricky. It's very hard to get them to look great. And it's certainly made harder with a more realistic looking game like Hell Let Loose, as opposed to other potentially more stylistic looking games. So it's basically a constant challenge for the tech art team to balance creating these cheaper to render versions of geometry so that it will still run at a decent frame rate on all of the hardware that we support while not looking terrible. And the not looking terrible bit, it's just a time consuming process, really. You will notice literally every single update, the LODs will be improved in numerous different areas on all the maps. And this is one of those areas where I don't think we could, within the next few years, tackle every single part of every single level that exists and make them perfect. So if the community can basically let us know the worst offenders, which you already have done, and we've been going in and fixing those, they go to the top of our priority list, and we'll get them sorted.
Cool.
Awesome. Yeah, that's huge. One last optimization bug fix technical question we have. And we've seen this happen a little more recently than prior, but VoIP. What's our strategy on making sure VoIP is viable? Is this something that we can partner with Vivox on? How does that work, and how do we continue to improve that quality?
Yeah, so we do work closely with Vivox. They actually recently reached out to us, and they had themselves been looking into user reports of voice issues, and have managed to identify that there was an issue in Vivox, particularly if people were using mobile-based data networks for connecting to the game. Then there's a high chance that the Vivox would basically stop working and the connection would fail. That has been fixed in the most recent Vivox SDK, which we have updated to, and in 14.3 that will be in there. So we're hopeful that a percentage of voice issues will be fixed. I'm not going to say it's all of them. I don't think it is. We've already pushed out over the last few updates a few fixes, things that we noticed. So, for instance, previously, if you failed to connect to Vivox for whatever reason, poor networking environment or whatever it might be, something that's caused that to fail. Previously, there would be 0 attempts from the game to reconnect, so which obviously isn't ideal. So we implemented, I think it was for update 14, we implemented basically a retry loop. So, if that happens, and, network environments are never perfect, it always can happen. It will retry now, it will keep retrying to join. But it'll be interesting to see what happens when update 14.3 comes out. Like I say, there's a new Vivox SDK. In that, I hope it's going to be better. The thing which makes this in particular hard for us is we very rarely get issues in our development environment, which is something which we are investigating with Vivox. They managed to identify that there is a configuration difference between what we use for during development on the server side than what's happening in the wild. So we're working with them to make sure that's the same, which might make it so that we're able to start seeing more issues during development. But to this point, we've typically had to make improvements and fixes and then wait for the next update to go live and then to identify what is now breaking, and we are utilizing analytics to be able to identify issues. So it's a case of every single update we will spend some time sitting down and having a look at those analytics to go like, okay, what's broken now, and then we can fix another thing. But again, typically we won't be able to reproduce that issue in our development environment. So it'll be a case of making a fix, and then when the next update goes live, we repeat the cycle. So unfortunately, when it comes to this, it's quite a slow turnaround for us. But we do continue to work on it every single update.
Awesome.
And it's also why the PTEs are so important now that they're back, and we're going to be doing so many of them. That we need that data coming in from a live environment, so that, as Kieran says, we're not waiting on all these issues coming in post a patch or post an update, so we can be more proactive. Because obviously when you're working with a third party like Vivox, there's also only so much we can fix our side. It might not even be on our side that there's an issue, and then we have to flag it with them, and then they have to fix it. So again, all these timelines just get stretched, and then it ends up being a much longer term issue, which just isn't good enough.
As two people who help run a Hello Loose server, we feel your pain on working with another party.
Oh, don't.
We don't need to go down that rabbit hole, though.
It is on one of my things to do, and that is a promise to the community. I am looking at that, and that is something that we will be doing a full audit of, seeing how we can improve, because it's unfair for you guys to have a subpar experience that we can't control. But that involves us working with the GSPs and working with them and finding a solution. But that is a top of the list thing, is trying to sort that out.
Next question. So Matt, you were talking about garrisons, right? Garrisons are so important in Hella Loose. With the recent announcement of the firing range, players are worried that the firing range necessarily won't assist players in being onboarded. I know we put a lot of focus in the roadmap of being onboarded and making that more approachable for more players. How does the firing range assist players with onboarding? And then furthermore, how are we going to continue to assist players with onboarding? Map control is so important.
I totally agree. For someone who plays the game daily, really, and plays often with new players, new people will join the squad, and they're like, "Hey, I'm new. Right, what am I meant to do?" Right?
Fall in line.
And so, stay in cover and do what the squad leader tells you. But generally speaking, the practice area that we've developed really is it's an extensible system. So what that means, we've designed it in mind to be modular. So we've done it. We'll develop it in terms of stages. So the first stage are the things that we know every single type of role will do: traversal and firing of a weapon, changing to a different loadout, changing to a different role, getting inside vehicles and armor, driving them around, things like that. And the thinking behind a lot of this is that there are times where we'll be playing with players in the community and our own thoughts as well, where in Hell Let Loose, there isn't really a safe environment to try anything. You're trying anything in combat, which is a very steep learning curve for most people, and it's quite intimidating. So we said, hey, it would be really cool to let people try all the different guns that they've got, drive, even getting into a vehicle and driving it around for the first time. When you get into a truck and everyone climbs into the back, you're like, I've never driven one of these before. It's quite an intense experience, right? So give everyone a safe environment to do so. And then we want to expand upon that over a series of different deliverables, expanding that out. So, for example, we would like more people to try being a commander. One of the things we've learned at Expression, which has been a great experience, it's been very entertaining for me, good for everyone, is getting new people to try squad leader for the first time. It's brilliant to see, but they learn so much about the game. They learn so much about the game when they play as a commander. Even just understanding the relationship between the support role and the engineer role, for example. So we've learned from that, and we want to expand upon that. But the one thing the practice range is, which I think sometimes is natural, I understand it. It is not a tutorial. For us, a tutorial is a very different thing than just being able to go in and play with the toys of Hell Let Loose, I'll call it. They're two different things. Now, we do want to do a tutorial, and we do want to do what we would class as a first-time user experience, right? With a very dev term. But basically, think about a player who's completely new to Hell Let Loose. Where do I go? What am I supposed to do? At the minute, I would say, in the training area, you can get to grips with the things you need to then go and jump into a match and start playing. But ultimately, the best advice to anyone is when we do the studio playtest sessions, I always give very strict instructions. Listen to your squad leader, listen to your commander. And we want to distill that down into those practice areas and tutorials when we do that. Get people. So there will be a practice area, for example, for the commander. Now, it won't be in the first stage because it's a bit more involved. We've got to think about setting up targets so you can practice bombing runs and strafing runs. For someone who has accidentally, obviously a great accident, put a bombing run on your own side, it's a key learning, So, that's important to us. But it will come in stages. And like I said, all I ask of the community is when you're looking at that practice area, think about it is a practice area. It's not a training area. I think that those two things are different for us.
Nice. Awesome.
Well, hopefully people practice putting down garrisons and supplies in there.
Dear God.
Yeah.
Would be nice.
So we got a big topic next. You want to take us off
Yeah,
here?
so we'll move on to that. It's good to be talking about the meta and stuff and everything. We'll come back around to that. But, it's before we start talking about current game mechanics, I guess, let's talk about the British. And while we're on the topic of 14.2, 14.3, can you guys go into detail about what your plans are for the British faction in terms of balance and fun? What are you guys really looking for this faction to look like by the time, I don't think it'll ever be done, but by the time you're currently, done reworking it, what do you guys see for it?
It's a lot. There is a lot of things we're doing for the British. And I totally agree. If you think about the British Armed Forces and the various allies of the British Armed Forces throughout the whole of history of World War II, it's a long piece of, because they fought in so many different theatres from the beginning of the war, the early war, all the way through to the end, right? So the things that we're going to do as a team, we are going to do a bipod for the Bren. Bren absolutely should have a bipod. For someone who's been shown how to use a Bren gun by other historians, I can absolutely testament to the bipod. The Bren needs a bipod, 100%. We are going to do the British Thompson. So there's a couple of different variants of the Thompson that we'll do. So, for example, there's a Thompson that had a front grip. There's Thompsons with a round barrel magazines. We'll do those as well. The Thompson it's a slightly different aesthetic to the American Thompson. We're going to do the British version of the Thompson. We are going to do the SMLE number 1 Mark III that I completely agree with needs to be done. We're also going to do the number 4 Mark I as well. So there'll be 2 new British bolt-action rifles. We are doing a new scope, so number 32 scope, that with the number 4 Mark I will basically give players the Mark 1T sniper rifle. We are going to do another additional Sten gun, so the Mark V, he says confidently. And we're looking at the Gammon bomb, for example. So in terms of firearms, we want to do an accurate, super accurate variety of different firearms on a per theatre basis. What this means is the weapons that you have access to in North Africa would be different than the weapons you have access to in 1944 Western Europe, we will call it. So different loadouts, different weapons for those two very different theatres of World War II. We're also looking at the Lewis gun, in particular with the relationship with the Bren. When I think about a rifle section in World War II for the British, my mind doesn't immediately think to a Lewis gun. I will be honest with you. It comes to a Bren gun as being the support LMG weapon. But the challenge with the Bren gun in terms of the balancing, the history of the Bren gun, for many historians would claim the Bren gun is one of the best weapons of LMG weapons of World War II. On paper, you might compare it to the MG42 and go, well, look at the fire rate of the MG42. You know, it's absolutely phenomenal fire rate. That is true, but obviously the German forces at different times in the war, their manufacturing numbers were not the greatest. And they suffered from that. The MG42 was expensive to reproduce, expensive to make compared to the Bren, etc., etc. But Hell Let Loose doesn't model those sorts of things. So when we're looking at the design of weapons, we can't take into account all parts of history because there is no idea. You know, it'd be very frustrating, wouldn't it, if you choose the machine gunner for the Germans and you go, "Hang on a minute, I've only got 10 bullets. This is not going to be very good." You know, that might be the case in the. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but in the history, certainly that machine gunners in the Wehrmacht were trained to fire in very short bursts, for example, at different times. So we have to take all these things into account. But the conclusion that I'm going around is this: we're going to do the Bren with the bipod, and we'll look at whether it should just be for the machine gunner, whether it works for the automatic rifle, but whatever. And the truth of what we'll do is we'll do tests, and we'll do tests within the PTE. We'll see from observations and getting feedback on our own thoughts as to go, okay, well, we've done the work. Actually allocating it to a class is pretty straightforward. What that will mean is we're going to completely redo all the loadouts. So with all these different new weapons that we're working on, we'll need to do all new series of loadouts as well. In terms of the armor, we are going to do specific pieces of armor for the British, specifically for North Africa, and have a look at the armor that's available for the Driel map. So, for example, Churchill, going to do one of those. Either, Churchill's a particular favourite of mine, either for North Africa, we're looking at the Matilda II or the Valentine. I'm super interested to hear what the community think of those two choices for North Africa. I'm quite keen on either, or indeed over time both. And then the Stuart, for example, for North Africa, having a look at that with the honey, which was what the British fondly called that. In addition to that, we're also going to make good on all the British uniforms for both North Africa and for Western Europe. So North Africa would have what I'll call the 8th Army type fatigues, the shorts and short sleeves, things like that. And then for the Germans, we'll do the DAK, so the Afrika Korps. And we'll do the same thing with the camo for those vehicles as well. So you'll be able to play North Africa with the correct uniforms, with historically accurate weapons and vehicles and armor against the Germans with exactly the same, with the German equivalent as well. Equally historically authentic and accurate. And what it will do is it will make the theatres much more flavoursome and historically accurate, much more thematic as a player. That North Africa will feel very different, as it should, compared to say Europe, as indeed it will when we do the Pacific as well. But hopefully that just gives people some inclination of the commitment we have to making sure that all the gear, all the toys, all the weapons, all the equipment that you'll be playing with is 100% authentic and accurate.
I love how Matt just drops that in there.
Yeah, it's so
We go-
smoothly.
So casually, and we'll do the Pacific as well.
Do you want me to leave this in there?
Well, when we think about World War II, the way that for a lot of people, when we think about World War II, we always, as historians, we always think about it in the terms of the theatres. So you think about the Eastern Front, you think about Western Europe, you think about North Africa and the Mediterranean, and there's a whole bunch of great stuff in there. And you obviously think about the Pacific; they're the theatres of World War II.
So yes, we'll say this. We want to do the Pacific. There's no timeline on it as of yet, but it is in the.
At some point.
At some point, we will be doing it.
One thing I
Very
forgot
cool.
to mention, actually, just go back to the uniforms a little bit on the British. It won't just because it's Operation Market Garden. This is a subject that's very close to me. My grandfather served in Operation Market Garden. It's a period of history I know extremely well. We will include the British Airborne for Operation Market Garden, and we will include the Polish Airborne for Operation Market Garden. The Poles and the British obviously famously dropped in and around the Arnhem area, including Drial, Polish in particular, and we will pay our respects to the Polish in that area, in that part of World War II, and so we'll include their full uniforms and correct berets, etc., etc. So yeah,
That all sounds freaking awesome.
That's huge. That is amazing. Yeah, and I'm glad that we're including the Polish too in that, and then specific uniforms per the
I
battle.
want to touch back on that at some point here, but before we get away
Yes.
from the British stuff being out. So we did have one specific question. Obviously, you mentioned all these tanks being added. Currently, the one British heavy tank in there is the Firefly. That is arguably kind of like the most least fun tank to use in the game because of its mobility and stuff. Will you guys be looking at, you guys are going to be adding more tanks, so you guys will be looking at the tanks as well? And all these things?
absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna look at all the armor for the British, everything from the ground up. The Firefly clearly, obviously, was not in North Africa. It's an interesting one with Hell Let Loose because of how Let Loose classes its different types of armor. The Firefly historically is fundamentally the same chassis, if that's for want of a better word, as a normal Sherman with a 75mm gun. It just has an almighty 17-pounder on it. So I'm going to look into, especially when we do the Churchill, I'm going to look into the different armor, the game mechanic armor values of Hell Let Loose and how they work in relation to how they were in.
We'll come back to that. We'll
have
come
a
back to
whole
all the armor
section
stuff. We have
for
a
the
whole
armor.
section for tanks, so I want to make sure.
I'm really shocked that you two have a whole section for tanks.
I know,
I know, right?
I wouldn't have put it down.
To be honest with you, I in particular, my team will. They're not here, but they would tell you that I take great enjoyment playing armor. I am a massive. We're very lucky here in the UK. We don't live too. We're not. It's only a couple hours from Bovington Tank Museum. Adam and I both live quite close to the Duxford Imperial War Museum, which has got a very fine armor collection. I'm a massive armor tank fan. The painting there, the tiger, that's one of my paintings. I love everything to do with World War II armor. So
man, we'll come back to that.
We're gonna dive into that. I'll tell you what.
I just want to make sure we get around to it. So it's good to hear about you guys with all the British stuff. I think you see the dev briefs and stuff, and you guys say you're going to revisit and stuff, which we don't understand how much depth you guys are putting into this. So it's great to hear all this, and I think a lot of people are really going to appreciate that.
It's a hot topic right now too.
It's such a top line answer as well from us when we just say we're going to revisit it. Because we never want to over promise and be like, oh, we're going to do this, and then we get into it and we go, oh, we really can't handle this. What the hell's gone on? But this is the one case where it's a bit of not wounded pride, but we all love the faction so much. Shocked we all sound like this. Really, really odd. But it was very much that case of you look at it and you just go, we know what we need to fix. And I think when I first came back on project, me and Matt had the first chat was like, we know we need to look at the weapons because we've got the wrong rifles, we had a naval and an air-based defense SMG and stuff like that. So it was very much us looking at it and going, no, we know we need to make this right. And it has been something that we've really nailed on. We can't wait to actually sort of get these in the game, show them everybody, test it properly in a PTE so that we're all happy with how the weapons work. We're not got overt weapon spray, which is going everywhere and everything like that. So we want to make sure it's great.
Totally agree. Behind a little peek behind the curtain, for when I first started on Hell Let Loose, I catalogued every single firearm World War II for the British, American, Soviets, and German forces for for Hell Let Loose, both all the firearms, all the different pieces of armor and vehicles. And for anyone who knows the history, I know a lot of the community do. There's an awful lot of vehicles used by the Wehrmacht in World War II. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, every time we look at a new faction, or every time we look at a different battle that we want to cover, we go through, and as you can tell, I'm a fan of books, so we go through all the history books and do quite a extensive, deep dive into the history of particular weapons. I think the other key thing in terms to the reference and the research is I'm a big believer in double referencing everything. So what one historian will say, I'll cross-referencing it with what the other historians that I trust their opinions on to say as well. And as a team at Expression, we've got an awful lot of people that know and are ever expanding high level of knowledge of the subject matter, which is great.
Fantastic.
I think people
Awesome.
appreciate the historical accuracy, so love to hear it.
So transitioning a little bit here, we're going into meta. So the meta of the game. For me, one of the worst parts about Hell Let Loose is the recon arty meta, where your whole game is spent
Yeah, sure.
camping them, right? So
What do you mean? It's great. Don't you like just being a recon and just sat there, not moving?
yeah, so I think the first question is kind of like, what are your thoughts on the recon arty meta? And then the second question is kind of going into like, how do we foresee that in the future? Does arty swap into like something that you can disable, or does it move into mortars, right? Like, what are our solutions? What are kind of on the table? What's our road forward?
You can go, mate. You've got some great ideas on this.
So, I totally agree. Totally agree with the frustration around that loop. And I have spent a lot of time with Max, the original creative director of Hell Let Loose, talking about different solutions. And I think we sort of see eye to eye really on what we could do moving forwards. I think, and there are several options. One option that we'll prototype and we'll put into the game is make an artillery commander ability.
Oh,
And the commander calls in the artillery as if they were what I would call a spotter. It does always, every time I think about artillery, I think, oh, it'd be great to have a spotter plane, wouldn't it? But certainly a commander ability for that's something we should try. Mortar teams, the mortars famously are, the first support weapon that comes to mind when it comes to light artillery on the battlefield, whether that's in history, whether that's a 3-man, what I would call a medium-sized mortar, or a small-sized mortar, which would be a two-person operated weapon. Now, within Hell Let Loose, we may, due to the nature of in fact, it's a video game, we may do a 3-man person mortar team as a 2-man person mortar team, as it were. Do you know what I mean? But certainly mortars, both small and medium mortars could be something. And I could see a great player agency with those. So you don't know you got to find the mortar team. That then leads me on to the next sort of thing I have in my head around self-propelled artillery pieces. So you get to drive the artillery around as it were in a vehicle form, and the vehicle has an artillery piece on it. And there are plenty of historical self-propelled, most forces had self-propelled artillery pieces as well. And again, that creates a more interesting gameplay mechanic because they can physically move, and maybe depending on the piece that we're talking about, maybe the destruction ability of that piece could vary as well. So I think the surmise of it is, as always, as with a lot of game development, there are lots of things we want to try out and prototype. And the way that we work is we'll have an idea, prototype it quickly. As soon as we think it's possible to run it into a PTE where it looks representative of the idea to see if it has legs, what we call legs, then we should do that and get feedback from the community. And that helps iterate. A lot of game development is a lot about iteration. So you try something, oh, this is good, this could work. Get some feedback, iterate, get some feedback, iterate, get some feedback and iterate. And that's where you kind of find the magic in the mechanics, I think. It's very difficult to say, I think, on paper, this thing here will work, 100% guarantee. from my experiences and from the team's experience, it's better to have a few different systems that we can try quickly and work out. So there's lots of different options to us, but it's something 100% we want to look at. And I've got we use a piece of so I won't bore everyone. We use a piece of software called Jira. Where we put all of our design tasks.
Yeah. I use
I'm,
that too in
I'm,
work.
I'm creating
Agile
Jira
management,
tickets
man. Yep.
for artillery prototypes. So
That's so
yeah, it's
funny.
something that we're very keen. Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Sounds good.
You want to make sure that it's not a passive as well, or you don't want to have to like dedicate a recon squad to just sit on the RT
Right.
when it's
Yeah.
because nobody's having fun then, and that's
Yeah.
the thing, and it just messes it all up. So it's looking at ways of keeping everybody engaged, everybody having fun, and not being a passive, but a necessity, like you're a necessity to your team, because if you don't have that recon squad there, you're just getting torn apart by RT, especially with some of our amazing like competitive sing guys where you literally have to, otherwise you're just getting wiped off the face of the map. So yeah, it's definitely something that needs looking at.
I mean, one thing we could try is we've got lots more ideas about support. Wild class as support weapons. So, for example, heavier machine guns on tripods. For example, the Germans would be using MG42s on Lafettes. The British had the Bren guns on tripods. The Americans 50 cals on tripods, etc. So it could be that as we develop this idea about more support weapons, that there could be a player support weapon team, and those players choose whether they want to run mortar or they would choose if they want to run a heavy machine gun, for example. They're all the different things we would want to try out.
Sounds good to me. So going back, we're talking about how it's kind of a chore for the recon arty meta. There's a couple of those kind of factors that come into Hell Let Loose and the meta and stuff. And one of those would be the node system. Right now nodes are kind of just something you just have to do. Like it's just it's not too fun to do. It's just you do it. Are there any thoughts to adding more depth to the node system, or making this more fun, making it more involved in the game aside from just giving people XP and team resources?
Yeah, there's actually one of the things that came out of the AMA, which we talked about, that I thought was a really good idea, was a simple thing like, and I think How Let Loose did this in the past, where the location of the node has an impact. I was like, well, that suddenly creates a deeper mechanic, because there's another variable there, another tactical variable. You have a choice to make as the player. For sure, there's a choice now to some extent where you put the nodes, but we all know, broadly speaking, the area where engineers put their nodes, right? It's the area where you can just about get to, where you can unload the supplies from the supply truck and build your nodes. So you can run that line along the map, and lo and behold, there'll be enemy nodes there. So having that extra bit of sort of depth to it, I thought was really interesting, and something that we definitely want to prototype out. And then that ability for certain items to be constructed near the nodes. So certain support weapons, I also thought was quite interesting. So I think there's a few different things that we are keen to definitely to prototype out. And again, this is why I'll keep asking people to join the PTEs. When we do it, we'll put it in a PTE. We'll use that feedback from the PTE, as well as other people's thoughts to get some. I'd like a bit more. I think with the thing with the nodes, what I'm looking for is a little bit more risk reward.
Yeah,
It's a higher risk, but
that's how
it's
it
a
used to
bigger
be.
reward.
Like you'd have like 3 people sneak behind enemy lines, go all the way back to that enemy HQ to build them.
I think
And
the
it was
key
fun.
is with those nodes though is like the risk reward, but making sure that it doesn't bulldoze other team. Because one of the changes they made was like you could only do it in blue. So if you were winning, the losing team could never come back. It's one of those things where you'd have to build it in the red. So it is risk reward, but it doesn't necessarily bulldoze and make it so the other team can't win at all. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I agree with that. Yeah, completely.
Cool.
So the next question here is well, it sounds like you're kind of alluding to that already with the PTE. Obviously, it'll be a great way to go ahead and experiment different ideas. Have garrisons been any of those ideas that you're working on, like differentiating the garrisons? Obviously, the most recent change with garrisons is being in the red zone. Like, how is that being looked at? Are we looking to expand the garrison capabilities, mitigating garrison capabilities?
To add on, like right now, anyone who's played Hell Let Loose for a while knows where garrisons are going to be.
Yeah.
It just kind of is what it is at this point. Is there anything that you guys are looking at to maybe change this up? Just the
Putting in
Garrison meta in
buildings,
general.
like
Yeah,
different
that'd be
things.
cool too. How do we take this one step further so it's not as predictable and less chore like? But defending garrisons and rebuilding them is the main part of the game. Let's be honest. It's become kind of just a routine thing to do now. So, is there anything you guys are looking at to add more depth to this, change it up a little bit, or anything like that?
We may have a new type of
Yes.
garrison.
Oh,
Whoa, what?
We may have a new type of garrison, but I'm going to keep a little bit tight-lipped about it because I
That's
think there's a few development things that we've been experimenting with. Because I totally agree, and we've done some tests within the teams with a new type, or I wouldn't say a rev. Careful how I say this. I, takes the good stuff out of the garrisons and maybe unhinges it from some of the frustrations people have with the garrisons. And we've done some prototypes, and we had a system working that we're very excited about, and that we will want to again. We'll run it the right time in a PTE. But yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree also about when you've been playing the game for a while, you get a feel. You kind of go, I know there's going to be an enemy garrison there. I predict it's going to be an enemy garrison, and that in itself can be quite a satisfying mechanic.
Yeah.
But I don't think that should be the only mechanic within the garrisons, within the Garry system. And I think the other thing as well is thinking about how to the amount of games I play, and invariably when I'm on the losing side, which of course very rarely happens, but does occasionally happen. Happens quite a lot actually. It's invariably because of the lack of garrisons.
Yeah.
And I was also thinking about is that good? Is that right that we should lose because of the lack of garrisons? I think the garrison does encourage the team play, or it can do when it's done really well. So yes,
so
very much so.
Follow-up question that we're talking about this. The last question I had, is there any way to encourage or reward players to build garrisons or play support, outside of just winning and the minimal XP they get from it? Because that seems to be the biggest factor. One, people aren't learning the game because you have to give them that carrot and then a stick. Besides a place to spawn, like what's their personal reward for building a garrison? What do they get out of it besides helping the team? So, how do you encourage players to do this, to play Hell Let Loose the way it's supposed to be played? Do you guys have any ideas to kind of like outside of a tutorial to kind of encourage players to do this?
I think one of the things I've seen, and I'm sure other people have seen it as well, when you've been in a situation where you're teaching someone to play Hell Let Loose for the first time, is that when you have someone new on the team on your team and you get them to run support or engineer and they're helping build something that someone else is doing, that you can see the penny dropping and they go, I kind of get what Hell Let Loose is more about, and that's incredibly satisfying. But I do think the game can do a lot better job of encouraging that. One of the things that we're going to look at is and I don't want to use the word accolade or medal system, but I think the rewards you get at the end of a match don't sometimes feel like you've been rewarded enough for doing the job you're meant to be doing or helping the job you're meant to be doing. So that is something that we want to look at. And then I think also there are some other mechanics that we're playing with at the minute that enable certain roles to do more things, but in the character of the role that they have picked, I would say. So, and that comes back again to some of the weapon team ideas that we've got. So maybe in the future, support role will be able to do more things than just put down a box with supplies. That's important that they do that, of course, but not the only thing they should be doing. So, yes.
Gotcha.
Interesting. That was very interesting answer. I'm excited to see the future of garrisons and hopefully like garrison density, because you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, that's why we kind of have the half tracks where you can split the difference. But what are the most common feedback we get? Hell Let Loose, it's a running simulator. Well, it's a running simulator if you're not building garrisons. That's all it is, right? Yeah. All about map control. We were kind of talking about the XP and some suggestions I had, and just kind of going into a question. Once you get to level 10, That's it, right? With the class. So like, are we looking into eventually, still recognizing players for like going past level 10 on a class, or diversifying, maybe getting a portion of that XP going to another class? Like, there's got to be a progression system. But once you hit that progression, that's it. So where are we kind of going from here?
Totally agree. I think that I never want players to feel that they're not progressing in some form in Hell Let Loose, and that could be progressing within the class, within their sort of overall career level, also progressing in helping other. I'm going to be very elusive here. Helping other classes with the class you've got and the XP that you've earned. Maybe there's something you can do with that XP to help other classes, for example. Um, so yeah, I get the level 10 cap, but I don't see that as being the ceiling.
Yeah.
All. Not at all. Do you know what I mean? And some of the new weapon systems that we're going to be prototyping out, maybe some of that will feed into some more things that you can do within those levels that you've attained and goals that you can get to as well. But yeah, I think the minute you feel like you're not progressing in a game, I think that's not a healthy place to be. I think we all need that feeling of we're working towards something, whether that's helping or our own individual stats as well.
So
Um,
you guys talked about redoing the British loadout system
yeah.
basically from the ground up. Are there any thoughts about doing this for other factions? Because loadouts can be a little funky. You have like Assault level 9 being potentially the best in the game. Then you have like tank crewmen only getting a torch at level 3. So sometimes new players really are at a disadvantage to some of these more experienced players with the current loadout system and stuff like that. Do you guys have any thoughts on going back and looking at these other loadouts for these other factions and working on those at all?
Yeah, we do. We've done some work on when we first started on the project. The first, it's all transparency. The first loadouts we looked at was the loadouts that we wanted to do and may revisit in the future for the Finnish and the Soviets as part of the 1939 Winter War. And in doing that piece of work, we picked apart all the loadouts from Hell Let Loose. And in going through that, we went, you know what, this would be better if this one was here and that one was there, and this did this and this did this. So yeah, I think that's very much on the cards. We will want to do new loadouts, and here's a good example. We will do a new set of loadouts for the DAK. So when you play in North Africa as the German forces, when you're playing the Africa Corps, you will have a different loadout as the Africa Corps than you would have done as when you're
Nice.
playing,
Like
the
Omaha
Germans
Beach
in.
or wherever. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's nothing, this there are these type of elements. We need to try out some different things, and then again, put it in the PTE, see what people think, see if it makes sense, see if it'll where we will start from will be from a historical point of view. So we'll say,
Nice.
okay, from this perspective, we would expect a rifleman to have this type of equipment, this type of weapons. We would expect, so as German soldier from the pioneers, they would have this type of weapon, etc., etc. So we'll start from there and then kind of work it into the mechanics of the game.
Lastly,
good to know.
for infantry, we were kind of mentioning historical accuracy, and a lot of feedback has mentioned in reference to being able to do select fire. So with the
Mhm.
BAR, right, different fire rates. Like, is that something we want to go ahead and do in the future? Changing fire rates?
Yes.
Nice. That's an
Definitely.
easy one. That's an
Simple
easy one.
answer.
Cool. Sounds
All
good.
right, so here we go. We're
Yeah.
gonna move on to the fun stuff. Let's talk tanks.
Yeah.
Currently with Hell It Loses tank system,
Yep.
it's the beauty and the curse. The simplicity of it is what makes it so
Yep.
fun, but it also is super, you're limited in what you can do with the tier system. And one of the things that when it went update 10 and went full release, we got, kind of this heavy tank meta. And that's the focus armor now. There's no real point in using another tank outside of the heavy in most situations. What are you guys thinking for in terms of tanks in the future? Is there going to be a whole ground up rework? You guys are going to throw away the tier system, or do we keep adding on to the tier system? What do you guys see for tanks in the future of this game?
As I said, so I love playing the tanks in Hell Let Loose. It's extremely yeah, I absolutely love it.
You can join us anytime you want. I'm
Yeah,
just
hit us
throwing
up.
it
I
out there.
love playing armor. I do love playing armor. I'm not sure. Kieran, I can't remember if Kieran, have you played armor in one of my squads before? I can't remember.
I
if you
haven't.
have.
No.
It's good.
I've seen how you've berated some of our colleagues for their abilities in the tank, so I've been kind of scared
Yeah,
of joining you in that.
Dude,
it's
you're not alone.
absolutely
We get
true.
that all the time. People tell us
That
that all
is-
the time. They're like, we don't want to be yelled at by you. We're like,
That is true.
understandable.
I, to be honest with you, I had a little bit of a misspelt youth when I was younger because we lived so close to the Imperial War Museum. I would go there. My mum and dad would ask me, where do I go for birthday? And I was a little boy. And it would always be, to the tank museum, please. That's the best thing in the world. Go and see the tanks and Spitfires and whatnot. So it's a subject very, very close to my heart. And I've done hundreds of bits of artwork of World War II tanks. In terms of the sort of direction that I would like to evolve to within Hell Let Loose, and I'll use this example, is when we get to the point where we could put in an American tank destroyer like a Jackson or a Hellcat, and it make a lot of sense in terms of the mechanics. So these are pieces of armor where their actual thickness of their armor is quite low. They're what I would call shoot and scoot type pieces, but they have a hell of a gun, a really good gun. And this is where, Hell Let Loose with its sort of Tiger, and we all know that there's a lot of myths about the strengths and the pros and the cons of a Tiger tank. The fact that 90% of the time that they didn't really, capable of moving very far, they were broken down. But the Tiger, that sort of class of tank can dominate the battlefield and be like you say, everyone just wants to be in that type of tank, whether it's a Tiger or, when we come to do it, a Tiger 2 or whatever it happens to be. Where I want to get to is where you can play in a Hellcat and it be a really fun and engaging experience, and you understand the tactics of how to use that piece of armor, even though it's got a class as a heavy or super heavy gun, but thin armor. So we need to think about armor in the whole. The way I think about armor is the whole of entirety of World War II, both from, and again, when we were looking at doing case yellow, for example, where does a Panzer II fit? There's no heavy tanks in the German army in 1940. So how's that going to work for the player? So it's thinking about all the different variables, plus with armor. Being buttoned up or open hatches is very much a thing of armor. Smoke dispensers, smoke launchers is very much a thing of armor, etc. I think the one concession I probably do have from the simulation is that I do expect armor crews to be able to converse with each other with a microphone, which of course in World War II a lot of them couldn't. Some of them even just had to use flags. I can't imagine that working very well as a mechanic in Hell Let Loose. But yeah, I think there's different phases of development work with tanks. We know, as Kieran was mentioning, we have issues with the physics of them, issues with them driving through the environment. Seemingly some pieces of environment you can drive through, which when you look at it, you go, why can I park my tank in the middle of this thing? It kind of looks very strange. And then seemingly other pieces of the environment, you just hit and you stop. You're like, why is this little bush stopping my tank? But I do want to be, ultimately, I think, in terms of the relationship between what I would call combined arms, so the infantry, artillery-esque pieces, armor, and air superiority. I'm not going to mention that too many times, but air superiority in World War II. There's some interesting mechanics of how all these different things can work and should work together, and within the armor, there's all this great variety. Another good example of this would be more interesting recon, recon type of vehicles. My grandfather, for example, drove a Dingo in World War II, for example, and it'd be cool to do some more interesting. Another, it's one of my particular favourites, Sturm Tiger.
Oh yeah.
So how would a Stern Tiger work in Hell Let Loose? How is a Stug going to work in Hell Let Loose? These are all the questions I keep asking myself and asking the design team. We need to have enough parameters to make sure that all these different types of vehicle have a meaningful impact on the battlefield, and it's just not dominated by the Tiger tank, which all historians will tell you it is a lot of myth with that vehicle. Do you know what I mean? So that's the approach we're taking. It's going to take some time because it's a major piece of the game, and there's a lot of very enthusiastic, tank fans, armor fans, etc. Both the history and the gameplay, of course.
No, I think you just gave a really good answer. Can I comment on the air superiority that you mentioned?
I love how Adam and Wombat are just like wide-eyed whenever you mention this stuff.
We're gonna move on
I
from
was like,
that.
where are we going with that?
We're gonna let that go.
I think my question with armor, you pretty much summed everything up, and I know, Kieran, this is kind of maybe going towards your neck of the woods. One of the biggest things recently in reference to armor and infantry was that movement speed change, right? How it made Forrest Gump able to catch up to those tigers or whatever the case is, right? Like the future of Hell Let Loose. Do we envision tanks going faster? Do we what's that balance between infantry and tank look like in the sense of speed and differentiation?
Yeah, well, I think as we've found out recently, we any changes we ever want to make has to be done in lockstep across, all the different ways of,
Right.
of moving through the battlefield. And we, as you'll have hopefully got the impression from speaking to Matt, we, and particularly Matt and other people on the team as well, very much wanting to get as much historical accuracy as possible into the game, more so than that's in there now. And it's a fact that right now, the armor in the game does not move the speed as it, as those vehicles did in reality. Now, this is where I don't know for sure. I'm going off what I've heard, and I can only assume this was PT'd back in the day of Hell Let Loose, that when Armour first made it into the game, they did go faster, and there were some quite hilarious results, I believe.
That sadly wasn't in PTEs. That was in the live build when they used to fly was live.
Yeah, I've heard stories of these flying tanks, and
it was gorgeous.
It sounds hilarious. It's probably not incredibly historically accurate.
No,
I've not read any accounts of flying tanks.
That's the air superiority, right?
Yeah, that's the air superiority. Flying tank.
There you go.
That doesn't mean it didn't happen. I just don't think I've read the history of that.
Hell Let Loose speedrun.
So it kind of comes back to what we were talking about before about some of the restrictions we've got on developing Hell Let Loose as it is now, and a lot of that comes down to the game engine, the way that things have been built, and we absolutely couldn't, for instance, make armor go faster because, well, you saw the results, when that was the case. And we, the game engine hasn't fundamentally changed. It's still running in the same version of Unreal Engine 4. It's still got the same physics engine, which will likely not enjoy having those vehicles go faster. So yeah, as Matt said, everything certainly from this point on is going to be measured. Would we like the vehicles to be more historically accurate in their speed? Yes. Is that possible anytime soon? Probably not. And the most important thing is making sure that we have that balance between the different ways of moving across the battlefield.
Yeah,
there's that weird middle ground between it being historically accurate and being really quick, and how it feels in the game as well. You need it to that sense of being a rifleman with no anti-tank around you, and the tank comes trundling down the road. You have that impending sense of doom, and I need to get to cover. And if this tank just rapidly just turned around the corner, you'd be it wouldn't feel like Hell Let Loose. So we need to like as Kieran and Matt say, it's finding that balance that keeps it true to Hell Let Loose, but also immersive and historically accurate. And if people want really quick rapid tanks, there are games out there that have quick rapid tanks that everybody said they should go play, and nobody did. But it is that sort of, we want it to still be hell, and so we need to look at how we do these changes. How do we build it in? We sound like a broken record going on about the PTEs, but it isn't just going to be about bug fixing for us, these PTEs. Like as Matt said, we're going to be prototyping new systems in these PTEs, new weapons in these PTEs, and then it's these incremental changes where if we go, we've been doing all of this work. Kieran's team's been working really hard at making sure the tanks don't pop a wheelie when you're just trying to accelerate. And then it's right, has this worked? Has this taken in? Does it feel right? Does it feel like Hell Let Loose? Because the last thing we ever want to do again is pivot and be like, we've done this amazing thing, it makes it historically accurate, and everybody goes, oh, it doesn't feel like Hell Let Loose anymore. And then we go, great, cool, we've just wasted loads of time doing that and fixing these big issues without having these discussions with the community. So yeah, that's where we're going to be really fine-tuning.
Another thing that we have done, which, you know, as Armour fans you will appreciate, I'm sure, is we recently created on the code team a new set of tools which makes it very easy for level designers to visualize the collision which specifically affects vehicles. Which you know, previously it was a case of, you know, seeing YouTube video and going like, oh god, what's going on in this part of the map, and looking at it's like, oh, the collision's all messed up. Now they can turn on a special mode which kind of looks really funky, very bright colors and stuff, but they can very easily, like, you know, sweep through levels and very quickly identify areas where there might be problems to fix stuff up. So we're being a lot more proactive at, you know, fixing those up. And again, I know I've said this a few times, but this is another area where the game worlds are large. There's quite a lot of levels now in Hell Let Loose. So, you know, if there are particular areas, please let us know. And, you know, with these new tools we've got, we can much more quickly go in and fix those issues.
Very cool.
So real quick, my last wish list here for tanks, please. I've asked Black Matter, Wombat, I think I mentioned this to you. Can we get the Fury whistle, like ricochet sound? I need good audio, like that crazy immersive audio. Postscriptum nails it. I just really hope maybe one day. My wish list.
Yeah, whatever you guys put in, just crank the dial up to like 11. And
Yeah,
we'll go
crazy sounds. All right, Fresh, I'll let you.
Cool. So we're running short on time, so I just want to cover a couple more questions. You know, obviously the comp scene is growing in Hell Let Loose. I would have never thought a game like this would have as aggressive a comp scene as it does. What are you guys seeing to capitalize on this scene, and you know, what do you want to do to grow and help promote it?
I mean, I don't think it's something we necessarily want to capitalize on. It's more, I really want to support it. My background is within the esports industry. I've worked with many communities across different titles to help foster their own individual communities and actually take part in some really cool tournaments. And that is something I absolutely want to see Hell Let Loose continue to do. And hats off to console players as well, because I know how frustrating it is to try and organize play on console. So no, there are things in the works that is going to be able to support them in the long run, like more preference selectors. But from a community perspective, I want to pick up the conversations that I initially started when I first came on board, just in terms of going, where can we support you? And that might look like, you know, potential content calendars where we can feature upcoming tournaments, events, and support those, whether that's with promotion or, you know, giveaways, keys that can help kind of really drive traffic to these events. And even like maybe reevaluating the places in which we showcase some of these as well. So maybe a spot on our website where we can highlight these, but also like the Discord channels as well. And kind of, I really want to reevaluate what those look like and how we can support the comp scene on a much larger scale.
I think they'll all appreciate that. And then, Raz, do you have any other questions about comp stuff, or you want to move on to console?
I think real quick, just the admin cam. Obviously with console, that's like huge. They don't have admin cam, and I guess that'll kind of go into the console question too, like the private servers? Like, is that a possibility? And it was kind of addressed in the AMA. So first part, just like any changes to admin cam, and then the second part would go into the console server browser. I don't know.
Is that
Who
a
wants to
question?
answer that one?
Yeah, that's
Sorry,
yeah.
sorry,
So I
sorry.
guess question one is, will there be any look at for the admin cam as it currently stands in Hell Loose? It's kind of a two-part thing. One for content and the comp scene, it'll go a long ways to smooth that out as well. I think a lot of people feel, and then part two is actually from the admin kind of side of things. When you're have to spectate some people, maybe like a first person option or something. Is this something
Mm.
that can be done with Hell Loose? I think it would help both those fronts.
I think it's definitely something to look into. Matt,
Yeah, we've done quite a bit of work on admin cam type designs. So we've done. Sorry for earlier. We've done the Jira tickets for it. So the design work's ready to be picked up from the code team. So it's just a question of Kieran and the production team working out the best milestone for us to do the development work, and then again we've done quite a lot of and that we've been working very closely with Alicia and on working
One
out
of
what
the
the
first
community
things I
want.
was like,
Yeah,
yes,
it's one of the first things,
admin
right?
cam.
So
Nice.
yeah, so yeah, it's very much so.
watch this space is the official line on that.
Nice. Cool.
And then,
And
yeah.
we do have a couple console questions, Raz. I
Yeah.
know you're more engaged in the scene than I am, so take it away.
Yeah, so I mean, just the first question, right? Server browser, like to console, is that happening? Yes, no.
It's
Matt, it looks like
something
you're
that needs
supporting it. Yes,
it
you're.
needs a lot of investigation
Yeah.
on basically the way that, I mean, we've already sort of mentioned this in dev briefings with the way that console was built. So it was built by another team in partnership with Team 17 and Black Matter when we did the initial porting. And so a lot of that, like Kieran mentioned, the server architecture on the base level is very similar, but in the environments is very different. And so it is looking at that and how do we get that to play nicely, and is it possible? How we do that? It's a lot of work basically needed to do it on. We're trying to see, and we want to look at doing that work. By the way, we're not like brushing it under the carpet and trying to ignore it. But it is there any quicker solutions we can do to help the console guys so they're not sat there waiting? Like I did when I was originally on project, I did both launches on PC on EA, but also on console, did the full launch there. And I know how starved the console community was for content for the longest time before we had update, when we added the Soviets in, and it was a gut-wrenching sort of situation to be in, where you have this amazing community that you can't give updates to. And so we want to look at how can we give these guys something that works for them, gives them what they want a server browser for in small aspects, which is like being able to find maybe certain maps, maybe looking at certain game modes, looking at certain server populations or how full a server is. So we are looking at that regionality. If you want to play with your mates, like if Matt wanted to play with you guys in a tank, obviously how does he come from the UK over to the US? So it's something we are looking at. We're looking at the longer term thing as well as short term on that, but it is a very tricky piece of work that needs a lot of work, like thought putting into it.
In the meantime, is this something that like you guys recently put in vote to kick, right? Would there be an option in the short term for like vote for maps or vote for game mode? Is that something that's kind of on the table, or?
That one's quite close to my heart. That's one which I've been championing internally quite a lot. I like the idea. Lots of games do this thing. You come to the end of a game and it goes, here are 3 options, and the people in that game, vote. It's like which one they want to play. So I like the idea personally of that as as a certainly short-term solution. Ultimately, I think we do want to move towards having server browsing, but that is going to take some time. It is far from trivial. So yeah, it's like that's one option. There might be other options as well. I think this is something where the community can help guide us on this. What would taking for us, pointing to one side for a moment, server browsing, we all want that, and we're working towards that, and we will get there. But if we acknowledge that that's going to take some time, what can we do in the meantime to make your lives a little bit better?
Yeah.
Also, something to put out there to the community as well is, if we ultimately one day get to the point where we do have server browsing, the work required to get there will give us the option for something. And I legitimately don't know whether the community would want it or not. Once we got to that point, we potentially could offer crossplay between console and PC. But I don't know. It's like, is that something people want?
You're gonna hear a hard no from everybody.
It's
So,
right?
Console players might want it, but the PC players are gonna be like, absolutely not.
Yeah. I would agree with you all. Yeah, I don't know if that would be the best idea, but I mean, that's cool.
It was always the mandate from like day dot was ring fence Steam, leave Steam as is, which is why we're in the situation we are in. Is because of that ring fencing. So yeah, there will come a time, as Kieran says, where we have that opportunity, and it's something that we will be listening to everybody's opinions on. That doesn't mean shout loud and send me hate
battling
messages.
this in Discord today, so
I'm sure. Some people are really passionate about it, but I don't know.
Yeah,
a larger community. But yeah, that's basically the console specific stuff. We want to go on to your stuff, Fresh?
I mean, we're basically coming to the end of the show here, so the future of Hell Let Loose is, who knows, for all of us on the outside. The roadmap, you guys will announce that soon, so I'm not going to bug you about that. But what do you guys foresee? Obviously the bug fixing that's the plan for this year. What comes after that now? If you guys do want to go into detail of this, like, people do want to know about new content. We can't, as much as people always say it got to be fixed before you have new content. Got to have content so people keep playing the game.
Yeah.
What comes next in terms of game modes and in general?
Our short term, and I'll shut up and let Matt talk on this because there's some really cool stuff coming. Our short term focus is obviously for the upcoming patches. 14.2, 14.3 are our bug fixing. We're on this. Let us solve some issues. Post that, we will have content coming. So I will shut up, but all that content will be PTE'd. It will be tested beforehand, and we will make sure that everybody is understanding of what's coming, what we've tried to do, where it is, and everything like that. And some of that, it's not going to be like next year, middle of next year sort of thing. We are looking at what can we bring to for our community that's new content, while we're still making sure we do these major fixes first. And then I'm going to shut up and let Matt talk because he's got more input as to what's like the cool stuff that's coming.
Thank you, Adam. So, yeah, we've got quite a few different strands of work that's in production right now. Literally, right now today, we've got artists working on, number one, making all the British stuff good. So all the weapons, all the armor, all the uniforms, not only for the British, but also for the Africa Corps, as well as some more things to keep it historically accurate for the Western Europe. In particular, I'm thinking of Driau map. Then in addition to that, we've got world artists working on new maps. And these are 50 versus 50 combined arms maps. So playing offensive, playing warfare. The locations that we're looking at we're looking at more France maps, but later, I call later war France. So after Operation Cobra, so Mortain in France, which is a very famous battle. We're looking at those sort of areas. We're looking at maps where the British and Canadian forces fought side by side against the Germans, and including the Canadian forces as part of our expansion of, I'll just call them the Allies. So Commonwealth forces and so forth. And we'll do historically authentic uniforms and detailing for those as well. And then we're starting to get into the conversations around, okay, well, France, great, 1944, great. what other parts of World War II are interesting for a Hell Let Loose player, could offer some different dynamics, offer some new gameplay. So again, back to the original ideas we had when we first started, 1939. So the Soviet-Finnish Winter War for us is really exciting because it's just so different, a different part of World War II that not everyone's so familiar with, but super interesting when you learn about the history, and it's a pivotal, moment in world history. So, and it'd be great to include more forces like the Finnish that are probably underrepresented in normal, video game World War II video games, for example. Then there are the wish list of things that we could do in the future, right? And I'm a big World War II enthusiastic, so I'll kind of look lovingly and go, Crete, Sicily, Italy, and we talked about the Pacific earlier, and there's a whole bunch of good stuff there that we could be doing for Hell Let Loose. So we've got very ambitious plans in terms of the content, but what I would say is we want to take a very measured approach. So rather than kind of, I think what we've learned from releasing the British, I think we've learned a lot from. We need to make sure that the forces are historically accurate, what the players expect, and maybe with some of the history we want to do, sort of lightly. I wouldn't say the word educate. That's not the right word, but inform. So you can learn more about that period of history through the gameplay itself, and like I said, by including the Polish, be respectful to the various armed forces that fought in those particular battles as well. We want with more North Africa maps. So, for example, we're going to all this effort to do the British and the Deutsche Africa, the Africa Corps. So, of course, we want to do more North Africa maps, and of course, we want to include more forces for those North Africa maps that, again, were there in the history. So, it's not always going to be about maps in France. I think that's the thing I want people to take away from this is we're looking at the whole of World War II, all the theatres from 1939, which is when we all sort of. It's always a bit arbitrary when when did World War II start? But for us, it's 39. Case White, I said the Finnish Soviet Winter War, all the way through to 45. There's a few historic stories that I'm interested in like Castle Itter, which came right at the end of 40, after World War II. But there's lots of options for us. Do you know what I mean? So, but we want to take that measured approach. We don't want to rush content out. We don't want things to be, not as good as they should be, as what the game deserves or what the audience deserves.
Yeah, we don't want to trip over our own feet.
Yeah, lots of new, like I said, the weapons and the vehicles and the armor and the aircraft and new mechanics as well. I could talk ages about. We've got lots of ideas about flak guns. Got ideas about including the German 88. All these different vehicles and things that flamethrower tanks. Churchill Crocodile, for example. The Finnish had flamethrower. The Soviets had flamethrower tanks in the Finnish Winter War. That would be. We may already have a prototype of a flamethrower tank, actually. These are all the things that we're constantly looking at.
You just dropped these in so smoothly.
I know.
These are things
Dude,
the community I've been crying for.
We could talk about this for hours and hours.
Well,
and
I think
hours.
it's important. I think it's important for a game like this, with the community that we've got, people are so dedicated to the game, and they're so passionate about the game and the rich history of World War II, and I think as a developer. We want to be. We always believe in being super transparent in the work that we're doing. Super transparent to the community. It's why we're open and honest about putting things into PTEs. You get to be involved in the development, but certainly the iteration of the development. And again, contrary to what maybe a lot of people believe, a lot of us. We play the game with the community, right? We're in squads with the community. We're listening to what people are saying about what they're enjoying, what they're not enjoying, what's good, what's not good, and the same with the social media as well. So we feel as much part of the players who play Hell Let Loose as we are the developers. We'll see things through a developer's eye for sure, but I think that's something we really believe in at Expression, is that full transparency in working with the community on the game that we love. So yeah,
I appreciate that.
Super exciting.
Raz, we're kind of at the end here. We're coming up on 2 hours, so
I just wanted to give you guys just a moment to share anything, share insight, or kind of some final thoughts, just address the community directly. So I think we can just kind of go around the horn, and if you guys want to say one or two things, Adam, want to start off?
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to be back on the project. I joined Team 17 to work on Hell Let Loose, which was great. So yeah, I've absolutely ecstatic to be back. Wish it was back under other circumstances where I know the next trailer that I make is going to be under huge scrutiny for very good reasons. But it will be. It's really fun to be back on the project that I love, and I just can't wait to actually share what we've been working on and for people to see it, and then to see where we can just go on this crazy ride, which, so like Matt's already dropped, some of the stuff we've got coming is really exciting, and I can't wait for people to see it.
Nice. Garrett?
Hey, yeah, the plans. Hopefully, you're really excited now, particularly listening to Matt about the things which are coming. Both in the near future and also the far future. But I want to just go back personally myself back to the task at hand. Fixing the game. I can't wait for 14.3 to get into players' hands. We've talked about the grenade bug already. Another one which I know that a lot of streamers moan about a lot. It makes their videos look terrible. The doubled up VFX on explosions, fixed. Another one which we see quite a lot, super widescreen support, done. The game, quite frankly, looked terrible on super widescreen. And a shout out to one of the programmers on Team 17's side, Thomas. He went on a personal mission. He had super widescreen, and he was like, "I'm going to fix this," and he has. So yeah, it's like we're passionate about fixing new and old bugs. Anything which impacts how much you enjoy this game. We're going to continue fixing it up while still working towards all these awesome new cool stuff as well.
Awesome. Wombat?
I mean, I'd just like to start off by saying thank you for being nice. I know it's been difficult recently, but no, the community is one of the things that really attracted me to become community manager and join the team. Um, so yeah, I just want to say thank you, and thank you for continuing to share your feedback as well. Something I'm really keen to see us start back up are the Hell at Live sessions as well, with our amazing usability team. So really, the kind of how Matt was saying, no, we want to PTE each new mechanic, each new change that we introduce. And I really want this to become, not necessarily an open floor, but somewhere where people can come and, actually feedback on a really in a qualitative way. So yeah, I'm really keen to see that happen.
Matt, want to round us out?
Yeah, I just echo the thoughts of my colleagues here. Thank you to the community. Thank you to all the content creators as well. Every morning I sit with my cup of tea and watch the latest videos on Hell Let Loose, etc. And I particularly enjoy them. Build more Garys. Listen to your squad leaders. Squad leaders, listen to your commander. If I happen to be playing with you, a good set of recommendations for the XP would go down nicely. It makes me feel good about the role that I'm doing. But no, thank you very much. Yeah, and thank you for our host today. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you guys again. Tune in. Hopefully for next time we might do this again. I don't know. We'll see. But thank you so much for tuning in to the RazCast. We'll see you guys later.